I think the last week has been extremely eventful, but also just the last few months where we, take a look at what has happened at Tesla, the amount of price cutting that they did last year for sort of incremental gains in volume, and the extent to which that has sort of reverberated for the rest of the industry. I think we saw that in Hertz. We've seen, Ford maybe going from potentially, fearing the arrival of the Cybertruck and the potential threat that posed to the F-Series line, and perhaps not being as afraid of the sort of competitive blow that could come from that. And also, let's be honest, some of these companies really struggling with execution issues. I don't think that we can sort of absolve some of these companies of some of the failures they've had to take a Tesla on. As much as they're having some challenges of lately, they're still, really sort of in a two-horse race here with, Tesla and BYD being way out in front of the rest of the industry and making this transition to electric vehicles.
Craig, you mentioned BYD, and that's where I want to go. How much of the pullback from the electric vehicle space by American manufacturers really comes from the threat that Chinese manufacturers can sell EVs so much more cheaply, and as soon as they come to the shores of this country, prices are going to drop really considerably?
Yeah, I don't think they will come to the U.S. in part because of the trade barriers that have already been set up, and we've heard rumblings of the Biden administration, even raising tariffs that are already sort of prohibitive. I don't think the Chinese manufacturers, including BYD, really see this as making any sense trying to enter that market in the near term. But I do think that we will see, a lot of politicking around this and sort of messaging around the idea of, do we want to go the way of losing out to the Chinese? And both sides of the political aisle will sort of fight on the basis of, do we want to sort of fold to the Chinese if you're a Democrat? And on the right, do we want to go in the direction of electric vehicles when the Chinese are so dominant? And so, it will be, sort of different messaging, but both will surely, sort of cast China as the boogeyman here to either, take on or sort of avoid.
Craig, I'm struck by the fact that Ford, yes, is pushing back some of their targets, but they still have targets of electric vehicle adoption in a much more mainstream way. From what you gather, do you think that this is an interrupted transition to electric vehicles or just simply a delayed transition?
I think more so the latter. I think what we've seen sort of the established car makers learn is that, doing a sort of slapdash effort of taking, an existing platform, in Ford's case, only slightly altered version of the F-150 and sticking a battery in it, that is not the way to sort of make a compelling electric vehicle. And I think we saw an effort on Ford's part to really sort of, place speed ahead of anything else and really get to market ahead of GM with the electric Silverado to take on the likes of Rivian and the Cybertruck, and some shortcuts that were taken that led to some compromises in terms of how well the F-150 Lightning performs. And so what we're going to see in the next couple of years is these car makers bring to market dedicated platforms that from the ground up were purpose built to be electric, and we'll see I think much more compelling vehicles. The question, of course, is whether that will be enough to bring the consumer who's proven difficult to sort of get to come around to electric vehicles, whether that will be enough to sway them.
Craig, we spoke to John Kerry last week, and he said that it's, quote, disinformation on why consumers are not catching up and being persuaded to electric vehicles. And at the same time, on Friday, a Biden administration official came out and said more needs to be done when it comes to the charging stations, because that is a real concern. So which one is it?
I think, honestly, it can be both here, where, there is a lot of, sort of, I mentioned the word boogeyman earlier. There's some really strange, sort of anti-EV messaging of, just how clean are these, or, this idea that you can't possibly, get by with the charging infrastructure where it is. Does there need to be a lot more progress in this regard? Absolutely. Are there people just, all over the place running out of juice and stranded by the roadside? No, that's not the case either. So, there is some truth somewhere in the middle here. I do think, the industry is going to go in this direction and needs to figure it out. I also think, it's going to be really interesting to see just how much this compromise of making the transition to Tesla's charging standard will help some of these manufacturers. That was a big, deal last year with a lot of announcements, but we won't see that actually come to fruition, until the coming months. And so whether or not that will help resolve some of these charging issues for these other manufacturers will be something to watch.